I'm sorry, I'm a bit arrogant. We have a top manager.
Let me talk.
I think I'm a special one.
Time to go! Let me talk.
Everywhere you go, there's meat pies, and I'm surprised that Americans haven't embraced this, because this could be like the greatest thing on earth.
You are now listening to Meat Pies Podcast, your podcast for most things footy and few things pie. I am Gabe, and I'm joined by Loic today, but much more importantly, I'm joined by a very, very, very special guest. We have the one and only John Pulskamp on the pod today. Did I say that right? Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, Pulskamp.
Okay, cool, perfect, beautiful. And John's kind of a rising star here in the world of MLS and also in the world of U.S. men's soccer, but we're feeling very grateful to have him on and kind of talk about sort of some big matches in his career. We're gonna go for this hat trick thing and also maybe some aspirations and just kind of get to know each other a bit. But we're really looking forward to this one. So thanks for taking the time and joining us on the podcast.
No, of course. Thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to have some good conversation about it all.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was really excited because I found out more closely about you because Brooke posted on her Instagram story. So context for our listeners, John's cousin, Brooke, one of my best friends from high school, she posted on her Instagram story, like, vote for my cousin for save of the season. Of course, I had to go in and put in a plug for my boy John down here.
Crazy double save
Against Portland, who as a Seattleite, we kind of despise up here. We hope they burn as the Timbers should. Wow, I didn't think I'd come out.
That was dark.
That was dark.
Really dark.
That was harsh. But yeah, just wanted to kind of give that context here because it's always fun when we kind of figure out that there's that random overlap. And yeah, that's how we got him on.
Exciting. But we're definitely this podcast will be a great example to all future players why they should come on the pod. I know John's about to kill his hat trick. And we're about to have a good interview. But yeah, I know, I'm sure we'll get into the background stuff a bit, but I don't necessarily want this to be just like a Wikipedia entry. People can go online and figure out that you're from California and this and that. Do you want to go ahead and give us like the first match that you brought for your hat trick, and we can jump off from there? I'm not sure if you have it chronologically, or just in an order that makes sense in your mind, but I'm really curious what direction you might start with. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, no, of course. When you were asking me that, I was always thinking like, well, what games are kind of the most meaningful to me? Because I don't know, as a player, I guess it's, especially as a young player, still kind of going through your career, you don't always like stop and look back to think like, wait, like, which games were really special to me? Or I guess in the moment you kind of recognize it a little bit, and you might keep a jersey or a pair of gloves from a particular game and, write a little thing. So there's a couple that I've played in, really recently, that stick out as special. And then there's a couple that I wasn't even playing in, but just being there, whether it's, my first Galaxy game as a kid, I believe they were playing DC United. It was a playoff game. At the time, it was the Home Depot Center. They changed the name of that stadium like 4 times throughout my life. So it's been inconsistent with the naming, but stuff like that. But I think the ones that probably are the most special looking back are all ones I've played in.
Yeah.
So I think the first would be my professional debut as a whole. So it actually wasn't even in the MLS. It was in the USL. I was 17. Or no, I'm sorry. I just turned 18, like right after my 18th birthday. So after the 18th birthday, it was against Louisville in Kansas City at home. And I remember I had signed for the club and I was all excited and I was doing well. And I was kind of like, ready to play, waiting for my chance with the second team. And it just never really like came. I wasn't playing for some reason. And I was talking to the coach, talking with the goalkeeper coach, and I started to kind of ask. I was like, well, I thought I was kind of signed to be starting with the second team and kind of, being put in front of the first team, and they're, were telling me that's, that's the plan, that's the plan. But you just got here, you just moved, we're gonna let you train with the team a bit more. And as a 17, 18-year-old kid, I was like, oh no, I'm fine, I'm good to go, I'm ready to play. But as throughout my career, and at many times throughout my career, patience becomes a key part of it. So finally, the week of, they let me know. They said, "Hey, you're going to be playing against Louisville, who, for those of you who don't know, USL soccer, Louisville is like the best. Louisville is
Juggernaut.
Yeah, exactly. Louisville, dominates the USL. Very consistent, year after year. And the MLS second teams tend to not do as well. It's a lot of younger players and experienced players getting their first professional minutes. I mean, like myself, this was my professional debut. So I was just kind of like, all right, talk about, throwing in the fire. And I always wonder if they did that on purpose because I was kind of giving them a hard time. Like, why am I not playing? Like, put me in, put me in, put me in. They're like, all right, you want to play? We're going to put you in against Louisville and kind of,
Yeah.
maybe give you a little sting to give you a taste of the professional life. And it was cold and it was rainy in Kansas City, as it often is. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't an ideal first game, to say the least. I mean, you're playing the best team in very bad conditions, especially as a goalkeeper. But yeah, things just went really, really well. I made a couple really good saves early on. Just yeah, like a few 1v1s off a nice free kick. I remember the saves pretty clearly, and we were able to pull out. And then the team played great as well. The team had like this fantastic game, scored like 2 goals in the first half, and we ended up winning 3-2. And I got a win in my debut against a very good team. So after that, I was kind of I remember going back to my apartment at the time, and literally just watching the entire game back. Which I still do most of the time, but I remember that was like I was eager to get home just to rewatch the game.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that would definitely be the first one. Just first professional game, got a win in kind of just the cold rainy night. It just all kind of came together really nicely.
Yeah. We'll have to look that up, do some Meat Pie's research and statistics and see how many other players have gotten a win, have gotten 3 points against Louisville on their debut. Probably not many. Probably not many.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and then actually my best friend now plays for Louisville, so I've
Nice.
having played against those guys a bunch,
Yeah.
and having a lot of those guys score a lot of goals against me in my early years in the USL. Now when I've gone out to visit him in Louisville, I've hung out with some of the Louisville guys and gotten to know them, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic. I'm like, oh, okay, like you guys have scored on me and have killed my team that I was playing against a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
That's super interesting. I have a quick I have a follow-up question on this. So first of all, I think it's really funny that as a 17-year-old, they kind of threw you into
And
like
obviously
the
he ended
hardest
up in jail.
scenario
So
for your
year and a half
debut.
passes.
And I love sort of the mentality of like, oh, like, you want your debut, like we're gonna give you your debut. But I am curious because Louisville is clearly a very, very strong USL team, and it sounds like the MLS two teams typically don't do as well in USL. But I'm curious about what is the is there a distinguishable difference in quality between USL and MLS?
yes, and that's not to throw shade at any some of these USL guys. Some of the
Right.
players in the USL are more than good enough and more than talented enough to play at top teams in the MLS. Especially like a lot of those Louisville guys. Like those guys are great players. Louisville's a great side, but in terms of a generalization, if you look at kind of the entire population of the USL and kind of compare it league to league, then yeah, I mean there's definitely a difference there. But I mean, like we saw in this Open Cup this year, I mean, MLS teams were losing to USL teams. Like
Yeah.
it happens. And I mean, just like in England, like, you know, you have championship teams make it to the final or semifinals pretty much every FA Cup. Like
Yeah.
that's, you know, and people can have their different reasonings of, you know, oh, well, they weren't playing their starting team. And that same thing happens in the United States because the US Open Cup is a time for a lot of young players to get their first team debuts as well. So, you know, the MLS fans will probably make their arguments of, oh, well, they weren't playing their starting team. But even in that case, you know, it's USL to MLS, and both teams are mid-season in their leagues and putting out the lineup that they think is going to win, you know, and then even this year you had 100% starting lineups, you know, lose to Sac
Yeah.
Republic, who had their run, you know. I mean, we lost to Sac Republic in penalties in
Yeah.
semifinal, so I mean, it's how it goes. But yeah, no, to answer your question, I think there definitely is, having played in both for a few years now. Um, Everything's just like cranked up a notch or two.
Yeah.
Whether that be the talent, skill, pace, speed of the game, physicality, level of finishing, all those things are just cranked up a couple levels for sure.
Yeah. How do you feel, like, can you talk a little bit just generally about sort of the USL system? Because you sort of talked about like that split between MLS2 and USL. And like over in England a lot, they have sort of like the U23s or U18s that play against each other for the clubs.
Yeah,
But there maybe isn't so much of that mix of like the young and maybe the old who are still either like grinding out professional careers or trying to make it back into the MLS or just, you know, like doing what they love in maybe a second or third division. Like, I guess, can you sort of talk about, is there something unique to the USL that either you enjoyed about it or that maybe you think could be improved upon for player development?
yeah. Well, to kind of touch on the point you were first making about the England setup, or like a structure in England where, you know, you have like the PL2, which is like the
Yeah.
U23s team, um, which maybe isn't, you know, you have a lot of the young players playing in that league, so not directly competing against, you know, professional men at the end of the day. You know, you have a bunch of under 23s, but even the under 23s title, most of those guys are 18, 19, 20. But then the thing that England has that kind of offsets that, or that fixes that, is they have a huge loan system. In England,
Yeah.
loans are extremely popular. I mean, most players will have 4, 5, 6 loans before they break out into their own. So I think that's really crucial. And people say, well, England has, you know, the PL2, which is going to be like MLS Next Pro, and it's like, yes and no. Like, yeah, that structure is kind of the same, but once those players are 20, 21, and they're showing good promise, they'll get loaned out to League Two. They'll get loaned out to League One. If they're really good, they'll go to the championship club. You know, if they're really good, then they'll make their Prem debut, you know? So, I mean,
Yeah.
so we see these young guys getting their opportunities, but I'd spent some time over there, and I know a lot of players over there, and it's the same sort of thing. It's like every single guy that I had met is at a different club right now, while still being signed to their, you know, their mother club, but then they're just
Yeah.
all out on loan getting professional experience. And I think if the US could adopt a little bit of that, I think it would benefit players a lot. I mean, there's a lot of guys within the league, within the MLS, that maybe aren't quite there yet, and it's a little too risky for these coaches to take that risk. But then they're, you know, and but the clubs don't want to sell them because of the potential they have, or they don't want to, you know, release them and get rid of them. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's, in my opinion, that's like, okay, that's when you send them to play against other grown men that they're going to be playing against in the MLS, but in a USL League One or a USL Championship type setting.
Or
Right.
even like we don't even send guys to other leagues, even like Liga MX or
Or
something.
exactly.
That'd be really interesting because actually you never really hear about loans like that. But it's also tricky because I think in the MLS and in the States we've done such a good job of developing talent the past few years that I'm sure clubs feel really confident in their ability to develop talent, but also maybe a bit, like you kind of said, protective of what they have.
Yeah.
And like if I'm a the head development coach at like Dallas, who's had an amazing development academy over the past few years. How comfortable do I feel sending a 18, 19-year-old kid out who I know is almost ready to play professionally to like a slightly lower league out of the country and not being able to have eyes on him all the time when that's like the most valuable asset at your club at that moment. That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Yeah, I wonder if, because I think about the MLS as sort of, still in its growing phase. I mean, it's kind of always going to be in its growing phase if you're comparing it to European clubs or European leagues, but it'd be so interesting to see what the impact on growth of the MLS would be were they to be able to accept players from Europe on loan, right? And take players, playing in the Danish league or some other league that's not a top 5 European league, and really kind of expand the name in different parts of Europe and sort of what we consider like the pinnacle of football. I was also kind of smiling because as you were talking about European teams like loaning out like over and over again, my initial thought, Gabe knows exactly where I'm going with this because he's an Everton fan. But my initial thought was Andros Townsend, who
interesting.
I forgot about his career, but he was loaned out. I'm counting on his wiki right now. 1, 2, 3, 9 times from Spurs.
Yeah.
9 times from Spurs in 7 years, and then signed in 2016 with Newcastle, made 13 apps, and then went to Palace, and then Everton. Now his career's over. Just a crazy
his career's not over.
trajectory.
He's coming back. He's coming back this season.
Sure.
Might get relegated, but he's coming back. But no, it also my initial thought went to like our group chat. I feel like all the time because like every single guy on the podcast, supports their own Premier League club. Livic supports Arsenal, I support Everton, and all the time, we all have our favorite young talents in our clubs, and we're tracking them like passionately, like making sure we're updated on every single match they play, if it's in like the third division in our country, whatever it is. But we'll be like, did you see this crazy goal that so and so scored? And everyone will be like, where do they play now? And we'll be sending updates all the time. So I think it's funny. Like, it's cool though, because we keep each other updated on like our sort of best young talents. Like we have a center back at Everton named Jared Branthwaite, who like I love. He's like left-footed center back. I think he's great. He's maybe like 19 or 20 now. He's playing in the Netherlands now for PSV. But he had made a couple senior appearances, but he'd been on loan in the championship 2 or 3 different times, and we all have guys like that who we in the back of our mind maybe know they aren't going to make it at our club, but we kind of love them and want to see
them be successful. And
100%.
That's really cool. And then especially if they do go on to have really good Premier League careers and stuff, and
it's like I was there.
I was watching this kid when he was 19,
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Exactly.
I don't know a lot of people that follow it that closely with their clubs, at least here in the States. I'm sure in England.
We're a little psychotic. I love it.
Awesome. I love it.
But I know. Well,
go for it.
I was gonna move us. I was gonna move us along here a little bit.
Well, okay, but this begs one question that's really important.
Okay. Yeah.
What is your Prem club?
If you have one.
If you have one.
Yeah, exactly. So, growing up, I was always a Bayern Munich fan.
Okay.
Fair.
As a young kid, it's like, oh, who do I support? And then you see Bayern in the Champions League, and their goalkeeper being the best in the world.
Yeah.
So as a young kid, it wasn't much thought into it. It wasn't much personal. Although I should say my dad's side of the family is German and from the Bavarian region, so there is some personal connection. I'm not gonna lie and act like that's why I chose them when I was 10 or whatever, or 8. I just thought, good goalkeeper, good team. So that's how I kind of ended up supporting Bayern. But I've always loved the Prem. I've always loved watching the Prem, even more than the Bundesliga. And I wouldn't say I necessarily have the Toffees, Everton. Growing up watching Tim Howard was always like very special for me because he's like one of my favorite goalkeepers all the time. Obviously, being an American, having such an amazing Premier League career, he's kind of been that inspiration for me. So I'd say Everton, but my brother is a diehard Arsenal fan. So he's having himself a happy year.
It's
But
a good time.
And
It's a good
and
time.
also, well, I sort of wanted to sorry to cut you off, but I did want to ask too, because this is a natural time to ask about this as well. I know you spent time at Bournemouth as well, and they're currently in the Premier League. We'll see if they stick. They have some interesting investment coming in right now, but is that like when you go and sort of maybe trial and maybe even more than trial, like spend a decent amount of time at a club like that when you're young? Do you still keep in touch with anyone at the club? Do they still keep in touch or keep tabs on you at all? Like knowing that you're sort of comfortable with them, they're comfortable with you. Maybe at some point you're going to look to move on from the US down the line.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So yeah, things went really, really well in my time there. I was there for about 6 months. But without getting into the nitty gritty of it all, essentially it just came down to me not having EU passport at the time. England was still in the European Union. And doing the whole, being a 16, 17-year-old kid, there was no way I was going to rack up enough of what they call the points. They have like a point system for foreign players. So that was just pretty much out of the question for me. So the club's hands were tied, my hands were tied, and it just kind of came to a natural end because of that. But 100% still in touch with a lot of people in England. A lot of them are no longer specifically at Bournemouth. Some of them are now working for the England Federation. Some of the goalkeeping, coaching staff, some of the technical staff on the first team, or at the time was with the first team at Bournemouth. A lot of them are now working for England, and I consider them good friends and good contacts and people that I can call basically at any time. But then another cool thing on that is seeing some of the players that are around my age when I was there. Because I was there 2018. And some of the players at the time were in the academy, or playing up with the 23s. And I remember thinking, my opinion on them, and all of a sudden I turn on the TV and they're getting a Premier League start, and I'm like, oh my gosh! So I'll always send them a little snap and stuff. But yeah, just a lot of good friends. So a lot of the players, I mean, I still keep in touch with Ramsdale a bit, the Arsenal boy.
Look at that. I forgot he was at Bournemouth. Wow,
That's like Loic's favorite player. You're talking Loic's language right now.
I love him. He's a beast.
Yeah, he's one of the funniest guys I know. So he's very, very funny. He's a good time.
Tell him I say hey.
Yeah, I'm glad to see he's had the success because he deserves it, and he's a genuine guy.
That's
nice.
Awesome.
That's super cool.
Bournemouth has developed some nice talent like over the past few years. It's not easy to kind of stick around and go back up to the Prem, but I'm sure there are also tons of people in the US, tons of people in California and in Bakersfield and all over that have been sort of tracking your progress a little bit too throughout the years here. And so I kind of want to maybe move on to that second match that you brought with you if you can, because the USL debut is huge, and a lot has come since then too.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I think the natural progression or the next game that was pretty similar to my USL debut was my MLS debut. I just remember training. It was shortly after preseason. So essentially the way MLS teams will do it, or the way they work, is they'll, fly all the players fly into their, market city. And then depending on how the club wants to structure it or what like the climate is with your market city, you'll either leave right away or you'll stay for a week or two training in your market city if it's nice enough, and then you'll go to wherever your preseason training camp is. So with Sporting, we always go to Arizona. Awesome place. It's a great time. And since it's negative 10 degrees in Kansas City or whatever it is, with all the ice and stuff, we're we take off typically pretty quickly. So we had left to preseason, and at the time I was the number 2 goalkeeper. So you're always staying ready, but at the end of the day, it's not 100% likely you're going into that first game thinking you're going to play. And yeah, Tim Melia, the longtime starter for the club. He had a good preseason. I had a great preseason. We were training good. And everything was just kind of going on normally. And then we fly back to Kansas City for the final week before our first game to just basically do some final training week of preseason and then go on the weekend to New York to play New York Red Bulls for the first game of the season. And I think, yeah, like 3 days or might have been 2 days before the game, we were actually in the gym and Tim hurt himself lifting weights, actually. So he sustained a pretty sudden injury. And then, yeah, kind of same sort of thing, like with the USL debut of like, week of, it's like, oh, you're playing against Louisville. It's like first MLS game, and it was like 48 hours before the game. It's like, all right, John, you're starting in New York against a very high pressing, kind of chaotic team that is the New York Red Bulls, and away as well. So but I was pumped for it. I wasn't thinking about any of like, oh my gosh, like, this is such short notice. No, I was just excited.
Yeah.
Bet this is awesome. So yeah, so flew to New York. And yeah, I mean, I remember only feeling excited. Like I don't remember being nervous, which is something I'm almost like proud of. Like looking back on, I'm like, yeah, like I've never really been like nervous for these types of games. So yeah, just I remember flying to New Jersey, not even New York. But spending that night and yeah, I mean it was still early 21, so I think we had our own rooms. Whereas, a lot of teams now, you'll have roommates on these away trips. But had my own room, so I was just chilling and then played a really good night game. I didn't have a whole lot to do in the game, to be fair. I think the team did a very good job of protecting me, but
yeah,
won 2-1. And I became the youngest goalkeeper to win an away match, or to start and win an away match. And then there were some other things like that. I think like top at the time it was like top 3 youngest to just win a match in general. I think Tim Howard was one of the ones that actually had me beat. But and then I think now since then even more young kids have gotten some matches under their belts. But
I'll say Sonina is pretty young as well.
yeah,
too.
I was gonna say now, yeah, exactly. Now Slanina has been I think he
Dang, we got a crop. We got a crop of young guys.
Yeah, now I think
playing
Slanina's taking everybody. I mean, he's probably put his name on some different titles like that all over the place. But yeah, so no, I mean, got a 2-1 win in my debut, and yeah, I just remember that feeling after that game, like just, I mean, yeah, best feeling like ever. Like you're just so happy. Yeah, just gave a big old hug to Peter, the manager, afterwards, and yeah, I remember like specifically. I don't know why this like sticks out in my mind so much, but there were all the guys were making fun of me for it because get back to the locker room. You just won the first game of the season. You're starting off hot. You always want to win the first game of the season because it just sets the tone for the next 11 months of your life, right? So everyone's excited. I'm like crazy excited, like just on top of the world. We're celebrating in the locker room after the game, and then finally it kind of calms down. And then I sit in my locker and just kind of go on my phone, and obviously my phone has just exploded. Family, friends, KC fans, like just is just a lot to kind of sift through. And I was over here like just trying to find pictures, like the typical young soccer player, like what am I gonna put on my IG? But I guess like I was just on my phone, not really paying attention. Next thing I know, Peter walks in and he's like, "What are you gonna go home in your kit? Like, what are you doing?" Because I still had like my stuff on.
Yeah.
And then I look up and like 90% of the team is dressed already, like to go to the airport. He's back in his like travel attire. The other guys are like coming out of the shower, and I'm just like, why did nobody tell me? Like, let's go. I got completely sidetracked. I was just on my phone for probably like 45 minutes or like 30 minutes at least. And like by the time the whole team had showered and everyone was just ripping me for it. but yeah, I don't know why that sticks out as like a memory. I guess I was just kind of
Yeah,
in
you were
my own.
just elated, like you were just
Yeah, I was just not like
overwhelmed with emotion.
exactly,
Yeah.
not a bad thought in the world, just happy and I guess time just kind of I was just kind of living in the moment. I guess time was
Yeah.
flying by, but
I,
yeah,
I
so
think it's honestly, I think it's like part of the reason we kind of like this format too, and talking about like these sort of seminal matches in people's lives, because it's always the things that you wouldn't imagine from the match that like stick out in your mind the most when you are kind of going back through those days, or the build up to it, or sort of even the wind down to like from it in this
yeah,
case scenario. There's always like something weird that happens before or after, or even in the moment that sticks out, and we kind of love hearing those
yeah.
stories. But I had a separate question too that's now escaping me as well. Luke, if you have something, jump in. I have to find what was in my head.
Yeah, I was curious. So tell me what tell me a bit about what it's like to train with an SKC legend, because I feel like Tim has kind of been around for so long, and obviously, he's what, 35 now, 36.
Pretty
Yeah.
good.
And it's crazy. I always think about how keepers, you probably chose a good position to become a professional in, because you'll be around for a while.
Yeah, that's
But
that positive.
yeah, that's one of the positives. I could never do what you do, but uh what's tell me a little bit more about like what that relationship is like, and working with him day in day out, sort of as a young kind of rising player, and having sort of that experienced guy ahead of you to look up to.
Yeah. It's funny because I get that question a lot, and
Yeah.
I think it's not as different as people like think.
Yeah.
Um, I'm Tim's young at heart, and he's just kind of one of the guys. So despite like the age difference, me and him are really good friends. Consider him a really good friend. And yeah, I mean, we're obviously competing with each other and going into the next season, competing for that starting job. So it's like
Yeah.
it's people might think like, well, that's obviously going to be a little weird, or that's obviously going to be a little tense, but anybody who's been a goalkeeper long enough to be a professional, and anybody who's a professional goalkeeper, that's for the most part gonna have like learned by that point how to kind of conduct themselves in a goalkeeping group, and that is the decisions out of the other goalkeeper's hands. It's not, any other goalkeeper's decision on who's playing, and all three of us are going to try our best. All three of us are going to give it our absolute best effort, and then that's all you can do. So might as well, be friends with each other, and be kind of civil with each other, because that's who you're with 90% of the day. Like, you go out early with them, you're doing the majority of training with them, and then you're just going with the team for like the final 30 hour of training, let's say. So yeah, so unless you want your life to be miserable, it's like don't make it uncomfortable. Don't be like weird. Don't be that guy that's like, all tense with the other goalkeepers, because it's like it's not helping anything. It's actually hurting the
Right.
situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, because
And
definitely been with goalkeepers that just create a very toxic environment to train in, and nobody likes it. The coach doesn't like it, obviously. The other players don't like it, and it just makes it very uncomfortable for no reason.
I feel like especially goalkeeper too. I grew up playing goalkeeper. I'm sort of like the goalkeeper of the podcast, honestly,
There we go.
with my attitude and everything. But I love watching goalkeeper training videos, like professional training
Oh yeah, like
videos.
TV.
Yeah, and like especially like when like England gets together, the national team releases them, and you have like Pickford, Aaron, and like Nick Pope all training together, and you can see like that's one of the most contested goalkeeper positions in the world right now, is that like England #1 spot, and you can see when those guys are training together that like one, they're mostly focused on themselves, but like everything's really positive, and from the coaches everything's really positive, and everything's competition, but you can so clearly see like when one guy makes a save and has like a really clean set of reps, like the next guy is coming in even sharper, and the next guy's coming in even sharper. It's like, I know that happens in every sport, like if you're training at your best, you're gonna end up lifting everyone else around you, but I think goalkeeper, especially when the other guys around you are training really sharp, you can see that you have to switch on just like that extra 1% to kind of keep up. And it's like it's a cool extra level of competition, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that's spot on. I mean, and having been a goalkeeper yourself, you totally get it. Like I've been in
Kind of not we gotta slow down a little bit because it's not
no,
nearly at the level like
no,
to U15s and then Sunday league from there on out.
but those same principles at U15 are that they just carry on just
For
at
sure.
at a further level, because even at youth, like I've been in like training groups that maybe aren't as competitive, and then the coach like will come like to me, or my coach will talk to me, he's like, oh, like you weren't good today, like why? I'm like, I don't know. And then they'll and then you kind of address it, and then it's like, oh, because you're just kind of going through the motions because you're
Yeah.
not surrounded by, and like he's and then we kind of address that as a problem. It's like you can't rely on having good people around you to train good. You need to be able to hold yourself to a high standard, because what happens when you're Manuel Neuer and you're the top guy, and it's like you can't just start going through the motions. You have to hold
Yeah.
yourself. But that's a whole nother can of worms. But it just reminded me of that, having talks about the England group and how you just kind of tell, you could see it with your own eyes that the guys are holding each other to a very high standard because of the competition, but then it's also lighthearted and they're having a laugh, and they're kind of having the back and forth banter with each other.
Totally. And I think like that's also to say like we expect huge things out of the SKC goalie position this year, whether it's you or Tim. And even we saw
Yeah.
that last year with like both of y'all getting nominated for save of the season. I think I'm assuming you guys are the only club that had two keepers nominated for save of the season. So it just shows kind of how strong you guys are in that position at the moment. But it was also cool to hear you talk about in the previous match, and maybe we can lead this into the next match. But how you said you didn't really feel nervous before that match, and you haven't really felt too many nerves going into these big matches and big moments, because I think like naturally most people feel nerves, and athletes, there's millions of documented cases where athletes talk about their own nerves and everything. But I think from the goalkeeper position especially, it's really cool that you can come in and be settled in those moments, because one, as a goalkeeper, you're using your voice more than any other position. So I've found like I've been nervous before playing in like playoff intramural matches in college and stuff. And like, if that first sort of like ball over the top comes in, in the 5th minute or whatever, and you are screaming at your backline trying to adjust them whatever position, and it comes out a little shrill or something, I don't know, everyone like that, but everyone can feel that, like everyone can feel that on the team, I think. So to be the one at the back, to be confident coming into the biggest moment of your career, but to maybe like Graham Zusi, it's the 1 millionth start of his career. So he doesn't want to hear the guy behind him be nervous or shaky. It's huge that you can come in, be young, and be sort of strong in a big moment for you.
Yeah, no, I mean 100%. Like, and I've talked to defenders about that, whether it's not even directly about me, but like we'll be watching the game, and somebody will say like, oh, like this goalkeeper looks shaky, and then all of a sudden all the defenders are like, oh, that's the worst, you feel like you can't do anything because I can't trust the guy behind me, and I'm just sitting there like, you guys ever think that about me? Like, what do you guys what is this? But yeah, so I always hear other players, confidence from the goalkeeper, I feel like definitely is a position where it just spreads throughout the entire team.
100%.
But yeah, no, I mean, and with the nerves thing, like I feel like a lot of people confuse nerves with just excitement. And like with excitement, like yeah, you're gonna get like adrenaline going, you're gonna have a little sense of fear, but fear doesn't necessarily have to be like a negative thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is something I kind of live by, or not live by, but there's something I really like, that I actually learned from somebody in like the outdoor industry, and that is the positive power of negative thinking. And that is, when you get those negative thoughts, kind of break them down, and you'll realize a lot of them are statistically unlikely, or just impossible or flat out impossible to happen, or it's just not gonna happen unless you do something to kind of set that chain reaction in motion. And then I think people get these kind of negative thoughts, and they get like they feel fear, or they feel kind of debilitated by it. Whereas it's like, no, if I get negative thoughts, like I'll just think of it rationally, and it's like, okay, well, that's very unlikely to happen, and it's only going to happen if I feel that nervous feeling, and I end up kind of forcing a mistake, or these sort of things. So it's like putting it into perspective a little bit and realizing, like, looking inside at your own emotions. It's like, oh, like, I'm not nervous, I'm just really excited. And yeah, there's a little bit at stake, so I maybe have a little bit of like a negative fear about messing up, but then you just kind of put it into its own perspective. So that helps me a lot, and that's just kind of the way my mind works. So I think that's definitely a big reason why I would say and I've said a lot, and everyone's always like, oh, you're lying, like, because I've said, like, I don't really get nervous, like, but I get that stomachy feeling that everyone else talks about, that people describe as
Right.
I just don't call it nervousness. I just call it, like, I'm excited, like, oh, like, I'm gonna go play a big soccer game.
Yeah, it's like the difference between good stress and bad stress. Like if you can just kind of look at it at that example of going into your MLS debut as good stress. And I also think it's really interesting because that reminds me a lot of something my coaches used to always say growing up. Like they hammered this into me, and as a center midfielder, like I felt like this was really important, was control the controllables. But as a goalkeeper, I feel like it's even more placed under a microscope because you're kind of playing in this game where there's lulls and lulls and lulls, and you just have to be ready for that moment, and you can only control that moment when you have to kind of come up big or take that risk. So that's really interesting to kind of hear that you have that methodology to kind of like break down the thinking sort of in a consistent way, so that when you're in those moments where you need to be nervous or like take that good stress, you're prepared.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Nice.
Well, there's no bigger moment than the third and final match on the hat trick of the Meat Pies podcast. So do you want to go ahead and shed all those nerves I'm sure you have right now, and share that last match with us?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this one too, because I was always thinking, like, okay, well, I have my more recent matches. Also being big in my career, it's kind of, in the second half of the season, I took over the starting job, and had some very good games, and some man of the match, performances. But I feel like none of them were as, like, special. I guess I'm gonna have a consistent theme with first. So first USL game, first MLS game. So I just thought, okay, I'll just keep it consistent with my first clean sheet. So in my debut, I did concede a goal. If you look it up, it's an absolute banger.
I'm on it. Let's go.
Yeah.
What was it?
Red
Was
Bulls.
against
It was
Red
Red
Bulls.
It was New York Red Bulls versus Sporting Kansas City in early 21.
21. I'm finding it. April 17th.
Yep.
Let's go.
It was 2 days before my 20th birthday. So I was 19 years old.
Do you know who scored it?
Yeah.
I'm finding it. Oh,
it was-
it's the most replayed clip. Let's go.
Yeah. Banger.
Well, wait, way to just dunk on our guest.
Sorry. I want to see the banger.
It's a good, like, he like spun around and volleyed it. It's like Katie Clark, right?
I'm sorry, that was fire. But
Yeah.
you did your best. You did your best.
No keeper in the world is stopping that. And if you
No.
think you're somebody that can, let me meet him, but yeah, no, it was Caden Clark, young player. Yeah, and I was actually in camp with him later that year, with
at the US camp.
Yeah, with the senior team, with the US camp. We were having a laugh about it, and I was, giving him the typical banter, like, dude, you closed your eyes and you had no idea what you were doing, and you got lucky. And then he's like, no, it was all calculated. But yeah, so anyway,
Besides the point, yeah.
Beside the point, didn't get a clean sheet because of him. And yeah, so then later in that year, This is kind of more of my like personal game. I'd say this is probably the most special game to me. Just I don't know. It just is just even more so than the debut. Getting my first clean sheet, just because of how it kind of went. Um, Playing against the LA Galaxy. And I don't know if you guys know, it's my former
Yeah.
club.
Yep.
Came up through the LA Galaxy's academy, and had a good time there. Like I developed more, like so much in that year. Like I went from like, oh, like this is a good young player to okay, this guy's actually gonna like go on to be a pro and have a bit of a career. Like I feel like that like really solidified itself in my time at LA Galaxy. And yeah, I mean the coaches there at the academy level and even with the second team were brilliant with me. Great coaches, helped me a lot in my career. Still in contact with all of them, basically, like great guys. But just with at the time, um, the club had a tendency to look outward for their players
Yeah.
Yeah.
within the system. And that was a very strong trend because I mean, I'm not even referring to myself at this point. I mean, you got guys like Alex Mendez playing in the first division of Portugal. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, guys like Zico Bailey, who's at FC Cincinnati, guys like Ulysses Yanez, who went on to play in Germany and then
Yeah.
Holland, Kobe Hernandez, who's in Germany, and Leo Sepulveda, who's playing in Spain. Like a lot of guys who, if they were anywhere else within the league at that time, at that academy stage, they would be on homegrown contracts like within a month.
Yeah.
And all of those guys, including myself, like we all just kind of, didn't work out for one reason or another. And yeah, so and then once I kind of, talked to Galaxy and was kind of like, well, I'm gonna go my own way then. They weren't too happy and they weren't too kind and nice with me despite both parties kind of giving an equal service. I was playing for them and playing games and they were treating me as a young developing player,
Yeah.
and took care of me and developed me, and I'll always be appreciative of that, especially to the coaches, especially to Brian Claybon, who was like the director of academy, Mike Munoz, who was the coach of second team, Ruben Messina was my goalkeeper coach at the time. Like those guys, like I owe them a ton because they developed me, they helped me, they made me the player. But some of the other people, I guess you could say higher up in the club, just really, yeah, not too happy when I wanted to go my own way for one
Yeah.
reason or another. So it kind of almost left like a bittersweet leaving. It's like, well, I grew up watching this club. I grew up supporting this club. Like I love the Galaxy. Like it's been my dream since I was a kid to play for the LA Galaxy. And then it's like, well, now I'm here and I think I can do it. Like I think I'm ready. And you have kind of like these people you looked up to kind of almost like spit in your face. It's like, oh, this isn't a great feeling. So yeah, so ultimately went on, and luckily found my home in Kansas City, and I couldn't ask for a better club now to be at. But
Can I chime in real quick and ask,
no,
like, are you kind of happy to have had that experience like early in your career, sort of getting a taste for sort of the business side of the game? Like, how has that sort of like changed your maybe mindset to okay, maybe not just like John the football player, but like John the sort of like entity, like business entity or
mhm.
like corporation almost.
Yeah. I would say it didn't change anything, but it greatly emphasized a part that was already a part of me, I guess you
Yeah.
could say. I think I've always been kind of that guy with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, kind of coming with something to prove. Even when I was joining the Galaxy, I mean, I'm not originally from LA. I'm from, the crappy town 2 hours north, like that's how I
Yeah.
grew up. That's how I was always looked at kind of thing. So even going down to LA, I was kind of like the new guy that nobody really knew that wasn't from Santa Monica with something to prove, So I already had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. But then kind of getting rejected by the LA and essentially getting like released, in that manner, really put a massive chip on my shoulder. Like I said, didn't like change anything that wasn't already there, but definitely was a bit of like, okay, that just cranked it up to 11, and now I'm not letting anything get in my way, and I'm putting my head down and I'm getting to work, and I don't care where I end up. Like you could any club that wants to give me an opportunity, that's where I'm going, and I'm going to take that opportunity. And Kansas City was sitting there with open arms, and they gave me an opportunity, and this is what's happening now because of that. Because that's all I ever wanted. I didn't want somebody to tell me how good I was, or I don't want anybody to give me some like free handout or anything. I just wanted somebody to say, hey, here's your one opportunity, take it. And then that's what I feel like I've done, and hopefully what I keep doing. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of all the personal emotion attached to this final game. So once I got word that I'd be starting against the Galaxy in Kansas City, yeah, I was just like, that was probably as most excited as I've been before a game in my entire life. Like even more than my debut. Like I wanted to beat Galaxy so bad. Like I just wanted to play against Galaxy. I wanted to beat them. I wanted to have a good game. And sure enough, yeah. I mean, again, another rainy night. I don't know why all these important games always happen in the rain, but it was another rainy night. And yeah, I mean,
I think is this the 2-2?
no,
No, it's a
Oh
clean
no, this
sheet.
is this is a clean sheet. This is a clean
Yeah,
sheet.
yeah,
We do have to talk about the 2-2 at some point.
yeah, of course.
Sorry. I got way ahead of myself. I got so excited.
No, you're good. You're good. No. Yeah, so this was in Kansas City, end of 21. So this wasn't even this past season. This was still my 21 season.
Right, I got you.
So yeah, this was a rainy night in Kansas City, and yeah, didn't have much to do the first half. But yeah, Johnny Russell scored a brace, and we won 2-0, made a couple good saves in the full 90. I remember one particular save was kind of 1v1 quick finish to the near post, and I just got like my studs on it, and turned it out for a corner. And I remember just like making that, I wouldn't call it like a routine save. Like it was definitely more than a routine save. Like it was a very good save, but it wasn't like anything, oh my gosh, like what a save. It was more like, all right, like that's a good save. But I remember getting up from that, just thinking like, I'm getting a clean sheet tonight. Like no one's scoring on me tonight. Like this is like just being so pumped. And then sure enough, like 10 minutes later, the ref blows the whistle, and we won 2-0. And yeah, and I mean, yeah, I think I I probably celebrated that game like I won a final or something. I was just so happy, like
Yeah.
happy that life in my career kind of came full circle, and then I was ultimately playing against the team that I dreamed of playing for, and then to get my first ever MLS clean sheet, it was just kind of my little fairy tale in my head.
It sounds a little tacky, but it's almost like your healing journey. Like
Yeah,
you were just like
went through the villain arc, and then
yeah. You had your climax. Your climax was when you finally departed, and it all came full circle. No, that's sick. Also, I love that you kept saying rainy night in Kansas City. All I have in my head is, can he do it on a rainy night in Stoke? And he can do it on a rainy night.
We always say that because Kansas City, I'm telling you, has like terrible weather, like horrible weather. Like it's icy and cold and rainy. It like snowed in April last year. Like this, like oh my god, Kansas City weather.
Terrible.
Do you feel like, I know maybe people, especially like defenders, don't love when the weather is really bad, or it can make things sometimes unpredictable, but growing up, for whatever reason, I grew up in Georgia, so we got some pretty serious rain sometime, like before matches. I
Yeah.
loved playing goalie in the elements. I don't know what it was, but like something about warming up and getting like those first couple like dives in and kind of getting like dirty and messy. I was just like, it just set the mood for me so well going into the match. I don't know if you feel the
Yeah.
same way being from California and maybe not
Well,
having the same elements,
yeah,
but
I prefer a little bit of rain and kind of, the ugly weather over it being very hot. When it's
yeah,
hot and the grass gets sticky, that is the worst. Like when I dive, I want to slide like 4 or 5
yeah,
feet. I don't want to
yeah,
like dive and then just have my whole body get grabbed by the sticky grass. So I'm
yeah.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. But I just can't do wind. Like if it's windy, mm,
Yeah, wind's brutal. Wind's brutal. At the
Honestly,
UW, wait, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there is nothing worse to me than playing in the Central Valley. Like I grew up in San Francisco, always going to tournaments in Fresno and Modesto and
yeah,
like
just
Stockton.
further north
Oh,
Bakersfield, basically.
literally. And it was just terrible. You would get to these tournaments for like, your regionals and you got to play like 3 matches in 105 and they got to take the water. It's just terrible. And I can't
Terrible,
even imagine
terrible
what it's
air
like for the
quality.
keeper. Terrible air quality. It smells like cow shit
Smells like
everywhere.
cows, air
Like,
quality. Like it's just, yeah, it's a horrible place. It's a horrible place. Central
Look,
Valley.
Loic, you're only like 2 to 3 years older than John, so there's a good chance y'all were at some tournaments at the same time. I feel like maybe.
possibly. We used to we played Real SoCal a couple times, but
Okay.
uh,
No,
yeah. Yeah. But we always lost. It was a shame.
club.
I played for a club in NorCal, Marin FC. We were nowhere
Oh yeah.
near.
No, I'm
Yeah. Oh,
familiar.
okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. So we used to, we would
World
go to Surf
famous.
Cup and play all these SoCal teams, and I always remember being like really jealous of the SoCal teams, especially the San Diego teams. I was like, damn, if they can just like, I always loved Surf Cup. That was always like my
Surf Cup.
little
Time.
my pride. But
Um,
anyway,
Yeah,
I was
wait,
gonna.
can you guys wait? Sorry, I just I want to dive into this slightly deeper. Can you guys talk about like the unique experience of growing up playing soccer or football in California and just like the hotbed of talent that is there, but also maybe like seeing guys from all different places go off in crazy directions now with their careers, or guys that like were legends when you were 14 that kind of never even panned out too. Because
I'm
like
gonna. I'm gonna.
what makes California unique, I guess.
yeah,
I'm
I think
tossing this one to you, John, because I can't. I don't know how much I can actually elaborate on this.
yeah. So like in Southern California, it's like I think it's really just the amount of people. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's such a small area. I mean, LA County has the same amount of people as like I forget. I was just looking at this the other day. Like this map, it's like almost the entire lower 48. It's just minus like Texas and New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like with that amount of people, one, you're gonna have a lot of different teams, and you're gonna have a lot of different teams with good players, and it's just you know simple. It's just going to cause a higher level of competition and produce a higher product. So yeah. So I mean, it's just a lot of teams in a small area that it's hyper competitive and just kind of rises the level. But yeah, no, I mean it was a good feeling, especially having like grown up in Bakersfield, which is kind of like here Southern California, and then it's like we're just kind of like somewhere way above it all, like kind of in the middle. It was like not north enough to be like Central Valley, Central California, but not south enough to be considered like, oh, this is SoCal. We're just kind of in that in between, but we always just kind of got lumped in with the SoCal leagues. Um, and yeah, I mean, just kind of like how you talk about going to Fresno or Modesto or Sac or like some of these places and just hating it. Once I moved down to LA at like 15 and I started playing with the LA guys, oh, they would all say the same thing. Oh, we used to hate going to Bakersfield. Like that place sucks. Like it's hot. It's not. It's just the fields aren't good. This, the that. They had all the reasons why they hated it.
I gotta say though, I got this little bit of Bakersfield pride because every time we would drive from San Francisco to LA, along I-5, we would
Stop.
always stop in Bakersfield and we would always go, you maybe know it, called the Moo Creamery.
Oh yeah.
I weirdly love that place. Like it is
Blue
really
creamer.
it's good food. Like it's not anything special, but I just
Oh,
really appreciate it because you're like, oh God, there's literally nothing
yeah.
between San Francisco and Bakersfield. And then you get to
Roasting.
Bakersfield. No, and then you get to Bakersfield though, and you get into this strip mall with like, office buildings, and out of nowhere, it's just this really good diner that you can just stuff your face at and then head back down.
That's it. That's exactly
That's
it.
it.
Shout out to Moo
Yeah.
Creamery. Louis, did you have something else before I ask this California question? Because I have more questions too. I don't want to force John to stay here forever, but I have a couple more questions I do want to ask.
I didn't. I was just gonna say. I think, like John said, you could probably attribute, California players to just pure numbers and stats. But I think the big thing that I always noticed was the amount of players, the amount of Hispanic players, like who were just so skilled and so excited to play.
Yeah.
And that always kind of stuck out to me as sort of like you play these teams that they're not necessarily glamorous. They're not the glamorous academies. Like Marin FC, my team was loaded with just like wealthy white Marin kids.
Yeah.
And then we would go up to Santa Rosa, which is, Santa Rosa and Petaluma, which is, kind of farm town. And we would play those teams up there, and they were just like phenomenal, like so hard to play against. And I always thought that was really interesting. I always kind of wondered what happened with a lot of those kids and if they were able to make careers out of playing, because they definitely could have.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a good point because that's the environment I come from. I mean, growing up from 5 to the time I left Bakersfield, I think I was, for the most part, me and my brothers were the only non-Hispanic non-Hispanic players on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had two other brothers that were, light skin, mixed, and then there was me, half Middle Eastern, half American German. So, but then everyone else was just Hispanic, either Mexican or a Salvadorian. And yeah, a lot of those guys went on. I mean, and then I always talk about this too because it's funny. Is like I have an older brother who's a '97, so in his mid-20s now, but when him and even the guys a couple years older than him were coming up, they were very good players. But I don't think people who aren't in the system realize how much the soccer landscape has changed in the past 5 to 10 years. And I don't want to say it's easier now. That's not what I'm saying, but the opportunity and the talent is being recognized and was recognized about 5 years ago, and then it's just kind of exploded. So now there's opportunity, like there's and we still have longer to go, like more ways to go in this direction. But 5-10 years ago, if you were coming up in Bakersfield as a player 5-10 years ago, you could have been a baller, but like what are you gonna do? Like you just didn't have a whole lot of opportunity. And I know guys like when I was 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and they were in their later teens, that these are very good players, like very good players. And then you're always like, you're asking like, where are these guys now? It's like a lot of them, like, yeah, maybe went to a okay college, but because of either like academics, like grades, or just not being able to get eyeballs on them, just not having the right people kind of making them videos or sending it out, or the whole like college recruitment process, like for some reason or another, like they just weren't getting like recognized. And then they would go to okay colleges and do kind of well, but then it would just kind of like just kind of
Fizzle
burn out.
out.
Yeah, it just kind
Yeah.
of fizzles out at the end of it. But then it's like, dang, like modern day, like I look back and I'm like, this has actually changed a lot, whether it's with the academy system, and now you have like kids signing homegrown contracts or second team contracts. Like maybe I was just out of the loop, but like that's a lot more common now than it was 8 years ago. Like,
Definitely.
so I think that's definitely played a big part in it. Because yeah, now I mean I was training because I'm in Bakersfield right now. and I was training with some guys yesterday, and there's a kid like head to toe in like San Jose kit. And I'm like, oh, like you play for San Jose? He's like, yeah, I play for their academy. I'm like, you're from Bakersfield? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what the heck? Like that's kind of like there's not a lot of kids from Bakersfield like going out and getting those opportunities. And like 10 years ago, or not less than that, 5 years ago in Bakersfield, that would have been like a big deal. Like when I joined the Galaxy's Academy, even in just like 2016, 2017, everyone in kind of the Bakersfield soccer community was like, oh, like one of our guys like is playing for the Galaxy Academy. And now it's just like, oh yeah, like he's playing for San Jose, like no big deal. I'm like, okay, that just kind of shows you like it's progressing in that direction.
Yeah.
Did you drive down to LA every practice? Like, were you living in Bakersfield and commuting down to LA?
No, so not when I was with Galaxy. No, so I moved.
Okay.
I moved down to LA. So yeah, quick.
I was gonna say that's insane if you were doing that. That's like what, 3-4 hours? Like,
Yeah, two, but
okay,
still,
yeah.
for a
Still.
commute, too long,
Yeah.
quick commute. But yeah, quick funny story. In my living circumstances in LA is hilarious. Obviously, it's LA, very expensive place to live. And as a 16-year-old academy kid, you know, you're kind of just at the hands of the club and what they want to do with you. So the club ended up renting out a garage. Imagine a 2-car garage converted into a studio apartment.
Yeah.
It was converted very nicely, to be fair, but I mean, you're talking 600 square feet,
Yeah.
like if that, probably like 500. Like it's a 200 square, or it's a 2-car garage. Like it's a studio, no walls. It's a little closet, a little tiny kitchenette in the corner with a little glass burner, 2 bunk beds, and TV on the floor, and then 1 little bathroom in the corner, and that's what we had for 4 guys.
4 of you.
Oh,
Are,
jeez.
are you close with those guys still? Like, was it like a rotating cast of guys that were?
No. So yeah, so one of them still like my best friend. Like his name's Zico Bailey. Plays at FC
Oh,
Cincinnati.
dude, Zico Bailey's a baller.
All right, yeah, no, I'll tell him. I'll tell him you guys like him, and he should
Dude,
get on.
I've like stalked on Instagram a couple of times because he kind of has cool style too. But
Oh
and
yeah,
the name helps. The name
He's
helps.
got the
Yeah.
name. He's got the look. He's got the fashion sense. He's got the music set.
Did he debut last year or even
I think
the year before?
I think 2020. Maybe it was 21. But yeah, so I mean, to this day, yeah, consider him one of my best
That's
friends.
crazy that y'all were living in a garage together with
Yeah.
like 2 other people just as academy players. I mean, it could be one of those moments where like 5-10 years from now, like look back, look at
we
all these
evolved
talented dudes were
every
living in
year.
this garage.
Every year we send the snap memories of just
Yeah.
I mean, as you can imagine, 4 16-year-olds in a garage, like you're fighting, playing. This is when Fortnite was like just becoming a thing, and like I remember we took one of the mattresses off the bunk beds and we just slapped it in the middle of the like hardwood floor, and there's a TV on the ground, and there's like mattress, like this kid, one of the guys, Oscar Cervantes, he plays at UC Irvine now.
Nice.
He just like donated his mattress to be our couch. He's like, yeah, let's just use this as the couch, and then at night I'll just sleep on it. But then like no, it's like looking back, it's like this is horrible. It's like no, this mattress got like 3 dudes sitting on it, like playing Fortnite. Like it's
like your own mini frat. It's your
exactly
own mini frat
our own
experience.
mini
Oh
frat.
man.
It's like looking back,
man.
it's just random. But
I have a couple last questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few kind of questions ago that you're of both like German and Middle Eastern descent.
Mhm.
I've seen some rumblings about maybe how the Palestinian Football Association should be taking a look at you, that you might be eligible to play for them. Has anyone reached out to you from Palestine, like to get you in this? I'm assuming you've been called up to the U.S. men's national team now, to the senior team. So I'm assuming that's sort of the long-term goal, is to get consistent call-ups there and eventually like establish yourself there. But is that something? Have they been in contact with you? Is that something you've considered to go play in Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, like I've been in contact with some of their guys, and I take a lot of pride in my Palestinian heritage. My mom was actually born in Kuwait,
Wow.
um, when her family, had left Palestine in Kuwait. But yeah, I mean, obviously, having earned my first U.S. call up, in 21, in winter 21, and having played for them at the youth level since, I mean, U14. I remember getting
Yeah.
my U14 call up, way back. So yeah, just having played for them, throughout my childhood, and getting that call up, and dreaming about playing in a World Cup. That's probably the path am gonna try to pursue. But yeah, no, I mean, it's not to say, I mean, it's not something I consider. I consider everything that gets brought to me. I get consider
Yeah.
everything that I get, reached out to with. And it is, yeah, it's something that I do take a lot of pride in, that heritage that I have. So 100%, 100%, it's something I, would love to, but now it's like, okay, let me think about this from a career standpoint.
Yeah. Is that something you have pinned? Like, sort of, I'm sure every single player under the age of 28 right now in the US sort of has that up on their wall, above their nightstand or whatever, World Cup 2026.
Oh,
That's like,
let me show
but
you this. That's the screensaver.
yeah.
Oh, let's go.
Because I mean, you have LA, you have Kansas City. Like, I mean,
Yeah, Seattle.
is this, I know it's kind of far away, but one, do you take sort of solace or confidence in the fact that there's so many young guys, probably guys you played with growing up, making it into the team and having a huge impact, and kind of gaining huge followings after a successful World Cup, and two, also seeing like Matt Turner, someone who to us was maybe kind of unknown a few years ago, kind of make that position his own this year. Do you sort of take any comfort in that, like knowing that in 3 years time, if things keep progressing in a good direction, there could be a spot for you in a role for you in a home World Cup?
Yeah, I'm 100%. I mean, it's something. Yeah, it's something that motivates you for sure, right? Because everyone knows a World Cup can change your life.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's even a little more personal for me because, at the time when I was with the U20s, COVID hit and actually took away my U20 World Cup.
Right.
I don't know if you guys know, but the U20 World Cup for my year was actually canceled entirely.
Yeah.
At
Mm.
That's
first,
crazy.
at first, CONCACAF qualifying was postponed, and then they, obviously COVID happened to the point where they just said, we're not going to do the Youth World Cup for this cycle. Sorry, you're out of luck, sort of thing. And that broke me because for a long time I was always kind of like this fringe guy on the youth national team setup. Like I was always like getting called into the domestic camps, but then maybe left off for some of like the European tournaments. And there was always 2 to 3 guys ahead of me. And then finally going into like this U20 qualifying run, we had a head coach that really liked me, and I got along with him great. And then I just remember like finally I'm like getting on with a coach, and I'm gonna be, really kind of like a more key member of this team for, not just some random tournament, but for CONCACAF qualifying, and then a youth World Cup. Um, and then that just kind of, all went away, but it's all part of it. It's all part of it. So yeah, so
Yeah.
for 2026, that's definitely the goal.
Yeah, we're all definitely gonna be tracking your progress closely and pulling for you. My last question is, how big of a legend is Johnny Russell? Because
Oh
I lived in Scotland for the past like 18 months.
no.
So even in Scotland, he's a well-known figure, well-known character. And we saw him tear our hearts out as Sounders fans, but also, you mentioned he scored in your clean sheet. He also scored in that crazy 2-2. No, actually, you know what? We know Johnny Russell's a legend. This is really my last question:
Yeah.
is did you know for sure that Chicharito was Panenkaing that penalty?
Yeah, Yeah.
How'd you know? How'd you know?
Because off camera, there was a lot of words being shared between me, him, and Ricky Puig.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No way.
So
We were
yeah,
loving
because
that
I was
transfer when it happened.
yeah yeah no I'll finish up with this story. So it was a handball that they were checking for VAR, and they were taking forever to check it. I was like, there's no way they're doing this to me, and like this is terrible. And I went to the penalty spot and I just started scuffing it like blatantly, like not even trying to hide it. I'm like, give me a yellow card, I don't care. I just
Yeah.
start scuffing the penalty spot with my boot, and then Chicha comes and gives me a little push, and then I played against him a ton, and he scored against me a ton, and I made some saves against him in the past, but we start sharing words, and then Ricky Puig comes over and he starts pushing me and saying some stuff too in Spanish.
I would say, I'm assuming you're all speaking Spanish at this point.
Chicharito speaks pretty good English. So he was speaking English. Ricky was speaking Spanish. And like growing up in Bakersfield, like I got Spanish, but like it's not like if somebody starts talking fast and in the moment, I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. But I just kind of knew. So I just kind of knew. I was like, this is to 95th something minute at home with the tension. He's gonna try to like chip me, and he's gonna like run and celebrate in my face.
Yeah.
So I thought 80% chance he's doing that, 20% chance he's just gonna blast it to keeper's left, his right, because that's his usual side. So I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna hold my feet, and I'm gonna like take basically a couple shuffles to my left, and if he chips it, I'm not gonna dive. I'm gonna be standing, so I'll just be able to catch a chip. And if he blasts it to the left, I'm gonna take a couple shuffles, and then maybe I'll get like a last minute reaction type save if he doesn't hit it all too well. And sure enough, he chipped it. And with the second he chipped it, I remember in my head, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I was actually right. Like
you look fired up after that too.
Oh, I waved my hand at him, and then I mean we're good. I consider him a friend because we played against each other so much. So we talked after the game and had a laugh about it and hugged it out. So
that's sweet.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
What a legendary tale.
Yeah, I feel like we should call it on that, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's a highlight, and yeah, hopefully a lot more to come.
No, definitely. I'm sure there will be more to come, and we'll be all the meat pies. You'll see us. We're gonna be just annoying from here on out, commenting on all your posts. Like, this is our guy. Like, we're gonna be watching every time you play, I'm sure as well. But
we do this with Alistair Johnston, because we interviewed Alistair Johnston, and then now he's playing for Celtic, and I feel like we're so obnoxious on Twitter about him. We're just like
the OG guest. That being said, though, we're on a good little streak here between Alistair kind of having a really strong past kind of year and a half since we interviewed him. Jessie Fleming, who plays for the Canadian women's team, has been playing really well for Chelsea since we interviewed her. Finished top 10 in Ballon d'Or women's voting last year. So Meat Pies podcast is really just a springboard. Yeah, it's for the rest of your career. It's a very good
you got to give us 10% of all of your sponsorship earnings.
That's true too. That's another story. But either way, we appreciate you coming on, spending time with us. Really enjoyed it. It was nice to finally have a fellow goalkeeper on the podcast, and we're gonna be watching this year for sure. Best of luck going into the season, and yeah, we really appreciate it.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you guys. Thanks again for having me on.